Welcome to another edition of Dave Smith Unleashed, and with the NBA playoffs here, and with the NBA draft lottery just having concluded with some shenanigans with the Dallas Mavericks getting the first pick, I think it's time to talk a little bit about the NBA corruption and the history of the lottery being rigged, and maybe some funny business going on with how playoff games are manipulated. Right here on Dave Smith Unleashed. All right, thanks to our sponsor here, MTS Transportation, 800-640-6873. Reliable, on-time delivery, compliance you can count on, round-the-clock support, superior communication, experienced logistics partners, and mention the Dave Smith Unleashed podcast and get 20% off your next shipment. So make sure for all your shipping, freight, and trucking needs, call nobody else but MTS Transportation at 800-640-6873. God, we're a couple of weeks in at least here to the Dave Smith Unleashed podcast, and off to a great start. I want to thank all the subscribers, all the people who have listened, and all the support we're getting here. And we're going to continue to bring you great content, of course, including today as we talk National Basketball Association. Well, but at the end of the show, I'm going to get into how I think maybe some playoff situations are rigged and how the NBA manipulates teams into the finals and into championships. But let's talk about the lottery right now. Now, I want to talk about Dallas winning the lottery this week with a 1.8% chance of winning, and maybe some examples over the years of other lotteries that were rigged. Now, do I think this was rigged for Dallas? Yes. Absolutely. Now, can we prove it was rigged? Can we prove that funny business goes on backstage? No. But, you know, I've got a set of eyes. I've got a set of ears. I have a lot of common sense. I've been following the NBA for a long time, and I think I know when I smell a rat. Now, Cooper Flagg is the consensus number one pick, and I'm certain that the Mavericks are going to take him, the All-American out of Duke. You know, he's just 18 years old. He should have been a senior in high school this year, but he graduated a year early at 17, went to college when he should have been a high school senior, had a great year at Duke, and he's going to be the number one pick in the draft. What a future for this kid. He's going to be 18 when the NBA season starts. 6'10", excellent defender, excellent shooter, can finish at the rim, rebound. I think the kid's going to be a star in the NBA. And now the Dallas Mavericks, after all the controversy with the Luka Doncic trade, with Nico Harrison getting killed, their general manager, and people calling it one of the worst trades in the history of the NBA, I didn't agree with that. I thought initially that Dallas got the better of the trade, getting AD and pairing it up with Klay Thompson and Kyrie Irving and Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively up front. I liked that Dallas team. I thought they were very good defensively and maybe had a good chance to come out of the West. Now, long term, who knows? With a 26-year-old Luka going to the Lakers, and AD and Kyrie both in their 30s now with a history of injuries, and Kyrie, of course, tore the ACL. He was out for the year. AD got injured in his first game with Dallas and was out for most of the second half of the season. So that's what you have to worry about with the Mavericks. But my goodness, boy, what a coincidence that they win the lottery and get Cooper Flagg. Now, when you look at all the reasons why the NBA might want Cooper Flagg in Dallas, here are a few of them. Of course, losing their most popular player in Luka, and probably the most popular Dallas Maverick of all time. And we saw when the Lakers went back to Dallas and with Luka and played the Mavericks, the fans were chanting, fire Nico, all the way through the fourth quarter as Luka scored like 100 points and the Lakers beat him. And there's a lot of pressure to fire Nico by ownership of the Mavericks, and which they didn't do, and I'm sure which won't happen now after the lottery. I mean, they struggle. You talk about a timely lottery win. You talk about the weight of the world going off the shoulders of a Nico Harrison. This is it. Is Cooper Flagg going to be as good as Luka? That's putting an awful lot of pressure on the kid to say that. Who knows? Who knows? He's already better than Luka defensively. So certainly when you consider Cooper Flagg is such a good two-way player, yes, he can be as good as good as Luka and maybe better. He'll never be as good as Luka offensively. But I think as an all-around player and a two-way guy, yes, he can be as good or better than Luka eventually, especially considering he's only 18 right now. But here's what people aren't understanding about this, and this is why you listen to Dave Smith Unleashed, because I give you stuff you're not going to hear anywhere else. Now, the Dallas Mavericks were sold last year by Mark Cuban to the Adelson family. And if you remember, the late Sheldon Adelson was a huge Las Vegas casino guy. Built all kinds of casinos in Vegas, and that's how he made his money. So his widow bought the Dallas Mavericks from Cuban, and the Adelson family owns a majority share now. So that, of course, raised the speculation, well, at some point, will the Dallas Mavericks move to Las Vegas? Because that's where the Adelson family is from. They made their business in Vegas in the gambling industry. They would love to have an NBA team there. It makes sense, doesn't it? But here's the problem. When the Adelson family bought the Dallas Mavericks, they have a plan. They want to build a brand new arena in Dallas, and they wanted to have it connected to a casino, because that's the business they're in. The Adelson family runs casinos. Problem. Casino gambling is illegal in Texas. Most people who live in North Texas, they go across state lines, they go to Oklahoma if they want to gamble. But at this point, casino gambling is not legal in Texas. Now, the Adelsons are putting a lot of pressure and hiring lobbyists and spending a lot of money to get that law changed. And the Texas legislature meets every 2 years. And they met this year, and they didn't give them what they wanted. They did not approve legalized casino gambling. They meet again in 2027. And I will wager right now, the Adelson family wants that new arena built, and they want it connected to a brand new casino. And they want the laws to be changed by the Texas state legislature to allow casino gambling. So it's a gold mine for them to connect a casino to the brand new arena. Now, when the legislature meets again in 2027 in Texas, and if they once again deny the Adelson family a new arena connected to a casino, I think we're going to be saying bye-bye Mavericks. You might as well get the Mayflower vans right now, the moving vans, and get them ready to roll into Vegas because they're getting a new NBA franchise. They're going to throw their hands up in the air, say, the hell with this. We've tried for 3 or 4 years now. We tried to get the legislature to pass what we want. They're not going to let us build our casino connected to the arena, so the hell with you. We're moving to Vegas. But if you don't have Luka, what's the draw going to Las Vegas? So the NBA is they're probably concerned, and I'm sure Adam Silver and the other NBA owners know that if the Texas legislature does not vote for casino gambling in Texas in 2027, they're gone and they're going to Vegas. But if they don't have Luka, and 27 with 2 years from now, AD's not getting any younger, Kyrie's not getting any younger, Clay's not getting any younger, they need a draw in Vegas. The NBA needs them to be good. Well, miracle of all miracles, coincidence of all coincidences, they win the lottery with a 1.8% chance of winning it, and they get Cooper Flagg. Okay, you want to say that's a coincidence? I'm not buying it. I think there was funny business going on with the lottery. I think the NBA is thinking a couple of years ahead, and Cooper will only be 20 years old in 2027. When and if the Dallas Mavericks move to Las Vegas and become the Vegas Mavericks or whatever the hell you want to call them. And if Cooper Flagg is as good as everybody says he's going to be, there's the draw. There's the draw going to Vegas. That's going to create interest in the team. I think that's why the Dallas Mavericks won the lottery. Yes, you want to replace Luka. You want to make the fan base happy. But I think you've got to look 2 years down the road. I think eventually moving to Las Vegas, that is why the NBA rigged the lottery to make sure that Cooper Flagg went to Dallas. Now, talking about, and I'm going to get into a great story, a conspiracy theory of mine here in a minute about the Cleveland Cavaliers. Let's look at some of the great lottery riggings or alleged riggings in history. Now, of course, we have to start out with 1985, the first draft lottery. That's the first time they did it. And the way they did it back then is the way I wish they would do it now. All the teams in the lottery had an equal chance of getting the first pick. They didn't weigh it like the worst teams have 22% chances and going down from there. Back then, 7 teams didn't make the playoffs in 1985. All 7 of them got one envelope in a hopper, and they had an equal chance, 1 out of 7 chance to win. Now, who was the prize in that year's pick, in that year's lottery? Well, it was the great Patrick Ewing, who had a tremendous college career at Georgetown, and I think everybody knew was a can't-miss prospect and a future Hall of Famer, and maybe can bring some world championships wherever he went. So round and around goes the bin. And back then, they had a bin with 7 envelopes in it, and they'd spin the bin round and round and round. Then they stopped. David Stern reached into the bin, and he pulls out an envelope, and lo and behold, the moribund New York Knicks, who hadn't won a championship since 1973, this was 85, 12 years in the past, had been a horrendous franchise, hadn't been winning, a struggling franchise. One of the flagship franchises that the NBA wants to win, And then who knows? There's talk that there was a frozen envelope that year. One of the corners was bent, and it's like the Zapruder film. People going over that envelope and closing in on it. You know, some of the pictures you can see that corner was bent a little bit. Maybe it was frozen. Maybe David Stern knew exactly which envelope he wanted to pick. Was it rigged? I think so. Absolutely, yes. Would I put it past the NBA? No. We'll get into that later with some of the playoff shenanigans. But yes, I think the 85 lottery was rigged, and I think Patrick Ewing was placed in New York. Now, 2003 is the next one I want to talk about. There's a young kid, 18 years old, by the name of LeBron James, from Akron, Ohio, right down the road from Cleveland. Cleveland's in the lottery with a 22% chance of winning. Lo and behold, who pops up with the number one pick? Well, yeah, LeBron James staying home, and Cleveland was a struggling franchise. They hadn't been good in a long time. And I'm certain that David Stern and the NBA thought, well, we placed LeBron in Cleveland, man, that saves the franchise. And it did. They got good in a hurry. The whole downtown area of Cleveland. LeBron he's a one-man reclamation project for a city, especially Cleveland. The second he came to Cleveland, and Cleveland was downtrodden, a dangerous place to be at night downtown. Once he got there, restaurants popped up, bars popped up, all kinds of businesses, all because of LeBron. The downtown area was revitalized. So yes, I think LeBron was placed in Cleveland. Now, is that Dave Smith just saying this? No. I saw LeBron on television this week talking about the lottery. And you know what he said? He said, come on, man. Patrick Ewing in 1985. Come on, man. Me? They kept me home in Cleveland in 2003. You think that's by accident? He was actually saying this on television. The Cavs winning again after I lost? Yeah, please. He said, Derrick Rose, the hometown boy, going to Chicago in 2008? LeBron was laughing about it and admitting that it was rigged. Now, speaking of Derrick Rose, let's go to 2008. Hometown kid from Chicago. Great high school player. Great player at Memphis playing for John Calipari. Bulls hadn't been any good since Michael Jordan. Well, I'm going to say retired, but he didn't really retire. Jerry Reinsdorf kicked him out. After the Bulls won their third consecutive championship, their second three-peat in 1998, Jerry Reinsdorf broke the team up. He fired Phil Jackson, and Dennis Rodman, Scottie Pippen, and Michael Jordan were gone. Can you imagine? And Michael Jordan said after that sixth championship, I'd love to come back next year. Can you imagine an owner who would say no to that? And an idiot by the name of Jerry Reinsdorf did. And then another idiot, Jerry Krause, who, by the way, I think was a very good general manager. But he said, players don't win championships, organizations do. Yeah, sure. How good were you after Michael left? And Scotty and Dennis, yeah, sure. Organizations win championships. But they were downtrodden. They weren't any good. And then lo and behold, with a 1.7% chance of getting the first pick, Derrick Rose goes to his hometown Chicago Bulls. And LeBron was laughing about that one too on TV this morning. Well, the other morning, not this morning. Now, here's one of the great Dave Smith conspiracy theories of all time, and I think this one is true. And nobody has ever talked about this except me for some reason. Why am I the only one who brings this up? LeBron leaves the Cleveland Cavaliers and goes to the Miami Heat in 2010. After that, Cleveland won 3 out of the next 4 lotteries with very low chances to win every one. Now, what are the odds of one team winning 3 out of 4 and getting the first pick? Almost 0. And they took Kyrie Irving in 2011. Then they took Andrew Wiggins in 2014. And who was that kid? Well, that kid from Vegas. I forget his name. Anthony Bennett, I think that was his name, who was a bust and didn't really play well. They took him first. Okay, Dave. Well, maybe it was just luck of the draw. Well, here's what I think happened. Now, bear with me here as I connect the dots. LeBron leaves Cleveland and goes to Miami in 2010. Then in 2011, remember that was the year that Chris Paul was traded to the Lakers. Pau Gasol was going to go to Houston. Lamar Odom was going to go to New Orleans. And Chris Paul was going to the Lakers. And it was a fair trade done by 3 competent general managers. And David Stern vetoed the trade, which was shocking, and unfair and should have been criminally investigated. Now, why would he veto the trade? Well, let's get into a little bit of history here. Remember when the CP3 trade was made to the Lakers? Who was the guy protesting? Immediately, Dan Gilbert, the owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers, was screaming bloody murder. He wrote a letter to David Stern saying, this is not fair. The Lakers are going to be stacked having Kobe and Dwight Howard and CP3 on the same team. It gives them an unfair competitive advantage. And he wrote a scathing letter threatening David Stern. You know, David Stern was always a pretty strong guy and didn't put up with a lot of nonsense when he was the commissioner. But do you remember how quickly he caved? The second he got a letter and a call from Dan Gilbert threatening him, he caved in and did exactly what Dan Gilbert told him to do and vetoed the CP3 trade. And I said to myself at the time, wow, was Dan Gilbert the commissioner of the National Basketball Association? Why did David Stern kowtow to him? Why did he cave in right away? Why was he afraid of Dan Gilbert? Well, here's what I think it is. Now, this is just Dave Smith's opinion and my opinion alone here on Dave Smith Unleashed, a conspiracy theory, but I think it makes a lot of sense. Dan Gilbert, when he was in college at Michigan State University, was arrested for being a campus bookie. He was on campus and he was taking bets and who knows the connections he had to the players on the Michigan State team or maybe some players on other teams. But he was a campus bookie. And if you were a student there or maybe not a student, you went to Dan Gilbert and you made a bet and he got arrested for it. Then after that, he opened up casinos in Detroit and in Cleveland. Anyway, with the NBA's stance on gambling at the time, remember, they were dead set against gambling, and nobody associated with gambling could ever be in the NBA. Why was he approved for ownership? That was interesting to me, that he got approved right away. Wonder what kind of connections he has in the underworld or in the gambling world where the NBA would be so afraid of him they would allow him to buy a franchise. So here's what I think happened. Here's the thing that connects it all. Tim Donaghy. And we all remember Tim Donaghy, the former NBA official who was fired for being involved in gambling on NBA games and being involved with with a crime family in New York. Really, through no fault of his own. I mean, he was a buddy of his he went to high school with set him up. I'll get to this real quick. Tim was an NBA referee. He played a round of golf one day with a buddy of his he went to high school with. Afterwards, in the 19th hole, when they're having a beer, the buddy brings out NBA point spreads for the night and says, hey, Tim, just for fun, if you were going to pick some of these games, who would you pick? And that's the biggest mistake Tim made right there. He should have told him, no, I can't do that. I'm an NBA referee, even in fun, even though you're a friend of mine. No, I'm not going to do it. But he looked and said, oh, this looks good, this looks good, this looks good. Picked 3 of them out, and they all were winners that night. What he didn't know was that his buddy he went to high school with was now an associate of the Gambino crime family in New York. So this guy goes to the Gambino people and says, hey, look, I got a referee on the hook here. He just gave me 3 winners. So then it was all over for Tim at that point. He's walking home from a game one night in Philadelphia to his hotel, and he's stopped by, a couple of mobsters who, the typical line, oh, what a shame if anything happened to your wife and your daughters. And they knew his wife's name. They knew his home address. They knew where his kids went to school. Scared the hell out of him. Then they had him, threatening his life. But anyway, that's right around the time Tim Donaghy was fired from the NBA and was being investigated by the FBI. Okay, so we're connecting the dots here. Dan Gilbert, arrested for being a campus bookie when he was a student at Michigan State. Tim Donaghy, around the same time, fired for his ties to gambling in the National Basketball Association. Now, Dan Gilbert has, I would think, due to his past, has all kinds of ties and connection to the underworld of gambling and knows every single thing that's going on. And I don't think anybody believes that Tim Donaghy acted alone, that other referees weren't involved. Now, I heard, when I was traveling with and covering the Lakers, people told me that coaches were involved, players were involved, front office people were involved, media members were involved. It was a widespread thing, this Donaghy scandal. But remember the way David Stern handled it? In about 5 minutes, Tim Donaghy was a lone wolf. He acted alone, case closed. Man, close the books, case closed. Nobody believed him. It was a lie. Tim Donaghy acted alone. He was a lone wolf, case closed. which nobody believed was true. And I think Dan Gilbert knew exactly what was going on behind the scenes. I think he knew how many people in the NBA were involved. I think he knew about coaches. I think he knew about players. I think he knew about executives in the NBA. I think he knew the truth about what was going on. Which, to me, again, my conspiracy theory, which explains why when he sent a letter and when he called David Stern and screamed and yelled and said, you have to cancel the CP3 trade, you have to veto it, and said he should have told him to kiss his ass. Well, who are you? I'm the commissioner of the NBA. You're not going to tell me how to run my league. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir, Mr. Gilbert. Yes, sir. Right away, sir. I'll cancel the trade. He caved in immediately. Why? What did Gilbert have on him? Why was he afraid of him? Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the Donaghy thing. I really do. It all happened around the same time. LeBron leaves Cleveland. The CP3 trade happens. It gets vetoed by David Stern after the protest of Daniel Gilbert. And then the Cavaliers win the lottery 3 out of the next 4 years. Yeah, sure. I think David Stern got the living hell scared out of him. And I think the lottery was rigged 3 out of the next 4 years for Cleveland to replace LeBron. I think the CP3 trade was vetoed because of pressure by Dan Gilbert. And again, you can disagree with me all you want. That's my conspiracy theory. And I think I can connect the dots, and I think it makes a hell of a lot of sense. Dave Smith and the Dave Smith Unleashed podcast, brought to you by MTS Transportation. Call them at 800-640-6873 for reliable on-time delivery, compliance you can count on, round-the-clock support, superior communication, experienced logistics partners, and mention the Dave Smith Unleashed podcast and get 20% off your next shipment. So call them at 800-640-6873. Let's make the final connection here. Anthony Davis to the then Hornets, now New Orleans Pelicans in 2012. Now, this is right in the middle of all this. After LeBron leaves in 2010 and goes to Miami. Then Dan Gilbert threatens David Stern and gets him to back down and cancel the CP3 trade. Then the lottery's coming up in 2012. Now, what was going on at that time? Well, George Shinn, who was the owner of the New Orleans Hornets, now the Pelicans, was having terrible financial problems. He was going through a divorce. He went through a sexual harassment trial around 10 years before that. He didn't have a lot of money, and he was looking to sell the team. And he couldn't find a buyer because the Pelicans were awful. One of the worst teams in the NBA. No owner wanted to buy the Pelicans because they were so bad. So what happened in the meantime? David Stern got the owners together, and the NBA owners bought the New Orleans Pelicans for $300 million. Well, we'll run the team ourselves. And that was, remember, that's when the CP3 trade was vetoed. David Stern was running the New Orleans Pelicans after the NBA bought them for $300 million. So David Stern had the authority and the final say there to cancel that trade. And why would he do it? Well, because he was threatened by Dan Gilbert. That's what I think. That's why the CP3 trade was canceled. And lo and behold, Anthony Davis is sitting there, and everybody knew he was a Hall of Famer. He was can't miss. He was going to be a great NBA player. He's going to be the first pick in the 2012 draft. Who wins the lottery with a very, very small chance, very small percentage of winning? Well, by golly, another coincidence. The New Orleans Pelicans win the lottery in 2012. And lo and behold, another coincidence. As soon as AD signs with the Pelicans and gives them some juice and gives the franchise some hope that they can be good again, well, they found a buyer. Wow. How shocking, huh? What another coinky-dink. Tom Benson, who owned the New Orleans Saints, decided, well, now that AD's here, I'll buy the Pelicans. And I think there was a deal made before. I think the NBA and David Stern told him that they're going to rig the lottery. You're going to get AD. Okay, if you do that, then I'll buy the Pelicans. And he bought them for $338 million. And NBA made around $40 million on that deal. So, yeah, see, there's the connection. LeBron leaves in 2010. Cavaliers win the next three out of the next 4 lotteries after Dan Gilbert wrote a scathing letter that he released publicly, ripping David Stern and demanding that he vetoed the trade. And unbelievably, Stern vetoed it and listened to him. Then the Pelicans can't find a buyer. They miraculously get the first pick in the draft with AD in 2012. Then they can find a buyer. Tom Benson comes in and saves the day. Wow. and you think things aren't rigged, and you think there's some funny business going on in the National Basketball Association, and before we close here, we got the NBA Finals coming up, and I'm going to make a prediction right now. Now, I could be wrong about this. If I'm wrong, I'll come on the air and admit it. No way, no how is the NBA going to allow the Indiana Pacers to beat the New York Knicks and get into the finals, because it's a Pacers-Knicks Eastern Conference final. There's no way that's going to happen because the NBA never allows two small market teams to get into the finals. Now, depending on who the Knicks Pacers winner is going to play, whether it be the Thunder or the Nuggets or the Timberwolves, all small market teams. They're not going to have two small market teams playing against each other. Now, can the Pacers win? Sure. Now, do I think NBA games are rigged? No. Do I think they're predetermined? No. Do I think that they will send an officiating crew to a game that gives one team an unfair advantage? Absolutely. They do it all the time. The officiating is all about analytics. The NBA knows the style of the officials. And with the two teams playing, what would give one team an advantage? Some officials call it tight. Some officials call it loose. Everybody officiates differently. And you can put a team of officials together and send them to a game that would give one team a significant advantage, and the Pacers are not going to get a fair shake from the officials. I'm telling you, in the Eastern Conference Finals. It's going to be the Knicks in the NBA Finals. You will not see the Pacers against a small market team. Mark my words. Now, can the Pacers win? Sure. If they play lights out and they play great, again, these things aren't rigged. They could pull it off. But they're going to have to overcome three officials and the New York Knicks and the NBA and the owners and the sponsors. Do you know how much this will cost the NBA if the Pacers get into the finals against another small market team? Nobody will watch. Nobody will care. The ratings will be in the crapper. And you know what happens when the ratings are down? They make ratings guarantees to the sponsors, the NBA and the owners. And if they don't hit those ratings numbers, they've got to do buybacks. They've got to pay them the difference. And if you got the Pacers against another small market team, they're going to be buyback after buyback after buyback. It's going to cost the NBA a fortune. They're not going to let that happen. So are NBA lotteries rigged? I think so. Do they manipulate the playoffs to get certain teams over and certain teams against each other and certain teams into the finals? Yes, I think so. Again, I don't think the games are rigged. I don't think they're fixed in advance, but I do think they'll send officiating crews out to give one team a significant advantage. Which referee will the NBA send out to officiate to make sure that the Knicks get over the hump against the Pacers? Well, I would imagine Scott Foster will be at a lot of those games. And he seems to be the guy the NBA sends in whenever they want a game to go a certain way. And one last thing on Donaghy. The NBA hired a retired FBI agent to investigate the whole Donaghy thing and the whole gambling thing and the whole connection to the National Basketball Association. And he came out a few years later, and you know what he said? Notice that the NBA has never released their internal investigation on the Donaghy scandal. And he said if the NBA ever released their internal investigation and what really happened with the Donaghy situation, they'd have to disband the league, they'd have to shut it down, and there'd never be another NBA. That's how scandalous and that's how dirty it was. We will see. We'll see how right I am about all of this. All right, that's it for Dave Smith Unleashed, another edition. Follow me on X to find out when the next Unleashed will be posted. I always talk about when the next show is coming out, so go to @DaveSportsGod, @DaveSportsGod on X, and I will post when the next show is coming out. So until then, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for the follows. Thanks for the subscribers, and we'll talk to you next time right here on Dave Smith Unleashed.